Before we get started, I just wanted to share a quick disclaimer. This podcast is based on my personal experiences and what I've lived through. Some episodes include difficult topics like trauma and abuse that may be triggering for some listeners. If you need support, I've included resources in the episode description. All stories are shared from my perspective, and names, identities, and specific details have been changed or removed to protect the privacy of those involved. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. My goal is to help others feel seen, raise awareness, and remind anyone listening that they are not alone. The question that cuts. Every survivor has heard it. Why didn't you just leave? The words that land like a dagger, no matter how they're asked. Sometimes it's sharp and full of accusations, like you're just an idiot for staying. Sometimes it's a little softer, almost disguised as concern. I just don't understand why you didn't go sooner. But the weight is the same. It feels like judgment, it feels like blame, and it feels like the world is telling you that it's your fault. And the hardest part is that survivors are already asking themselves that exact question. We replay that over and over and over again in our minds. Why didn't I go sooner? Why did I stay? How did I let this happen? So when somebody else says it out loud, it doesn't come across as curiosity. It lands like a confirmation of our worst fear, that maybe it really is our fault. That question is why so many of us stay silent, because we know the second we open our mouths, the world will ask, why didn't you just leave? Instead of, what did he do to you? And here's the truth. If leaving was that simple, we all would have left the first time. But it's not that simple. It's not that safe. And it's not what people think it is. On average, it takes 7 attempts before someone leaves an abusive relationship for good. 7. And that's not because survivors are weak or naive or addicted to the chaos even. It's because abuse isn't a bad date you could just ghost. It's a war you're fighting in your own home, and the rules aren't as simple as walking away. Let me go a little further. Asking a survivor why they didn't leave is like asking a soldier why they didn't just walk off the battlefield. Because what people don't see is the battlefield is home. The danger is the person you love, and walking away isn't safe. It's when the bullets start flying. Here's what statistics show. 99% of domestic violence cases include financial abuse. So survivors often don't have their own money or credit or even a car to just take and go. And survivors are at the highest risk of homicide right after leaving. 70 times more likely to be killed in the weeks after they try to escape. So when somebody says, why didn't you leave? What you're really saying is, why didn't you risk your life sooner? Why didn't you gamble with your children or your safety, your future, just to make me more comfortable with your story? That's what the question does. It blames the survivor instead of the abuser. It silences instead of supports. It shifts the shame onto the wrong fucking shoulders. My first abusive relationship, it didn't start with fists. Started like they always do, with charm, attention, and it was the kind of love that makes you feel like you finally matter. But it didn't stay that way. One night, it exploded pretty bad. I was beaten so badly that I ended up in the hospital. Bruises everywhere, a body that I didn't even feel like was mine anymore. And I still, to this day, can remember the smell, that sterile fucking smell of that hospital room. The fluorescent lights and the weight of shame that was pressing down on me harder than the pain I was in. The nurses whispering and the people walking by staring at me, and my mind racing with one thought. What are they thinking about me? Do they think I deserve this? Do they think I'm stupid? And that's the other wound survivors carry. It's the fucking judgment. Instead of being asked, are you safe? Do you need help? We're asked, why didn't you just leave? That question, it cuts deeper than any bruise because it tells us that people care more about our choices than about the violence we just endured. Here's a stat that many don't realize. 40% of ER visits for women are related to domestic violence. Think about that. Almost half of the women being treated in emergency rooms aren't there because of a car accident or random injuries or not feeling well. They're there because somebody who claimed to love them hurt them. And yet, instead of compassion, too many of us leave those rooms feeling like suspects instead of victims. Because here's the truth about hospital rooms. They're not just places of healing. They could feel like an interrogation room. Survivors are questioned, doubted, documented, but most certainly they're not always believed. A bruise might be photographed, but the terror behind our eyes rarely makes the fucking chart. I remember lying there and I was hooked up to the machines and I felt like I had two battles happening at once. One was the physical pain from what he had just done to me, and the other was the invisible battle that was in my head, the shame of having to fucking explain it. Sometimes explaining it hurts worse than the bruises, because how do you put into words something that sounds unbelievable, even to yourself? How do you explain that the man who once kissed you so softly also put you in this hospital bed? How do you explain that the same hands that held your face in love also left marks that strangers are now examining under bright lights? That contradiction is its own violence. Survivors aren't just battling what happened. They're battling the disbelief that follows it. And here's the kicker. People think hospitals equal safety. They think once you've been treated, once you've been seen, the system will take care of you. That's not always true. Too many survivors are patched up physically and then discharged right back into the same danger. Because unless somebody asks the right questions, unless someone really sees what's happening, survivors go home to the very person who put them there. And that's the part people don't want to face. Survivors don't always leave the hospital to safety. Sometimes we leave with prescriptions, a discharge paper, and the knowledge that we'll have to find a way to survive the next fucking round. And when people ask later, why didn't you just leave after that? They miss the reality. The hospital wasn't the end of the abuse. It was one stop along the fucking way. A pit stop in a war that was still raging the second I walked out of those doors. Another time, it wasn't the hospital. It was the fucking police station. I walked miles there barefoot. My face was swollen. I had black eyes, blood smeared across my shirt and dripping down my face. And every step hurt, but not as much as what had already been done to me. I thought maybe this time I'd be safe. Maybe this was the place where somebody would finally see me, finally help me. I sat there broken, trying to give my statement. My voice shook and my hands were shaking. The officers wrote things down and asked questions and nodded like they were just collecting facts for a file instead of listening to a human being who was terrified for her fucking life. And while I was still talking and still bleeding and still in shock, they went and arrested him. And for a small moment, I felt relief. I thought maybe that this nightmare was about to end. But before I was even done answering their questions, before I had finished telling my story, He was already bailed out, already free. And not a single fucking officer asked if I was okay. Not one asked if I had somewhere safe to go. Not one offered me a victim advocate or a hotline number or even information about shelters. Instead, when it was all over, they gave me a ride back home. The same fucking house where he lived. To the same front door I just ran out of, fucking barefoot and bloodied. That's what people don't realize or understand. Survivors aren't always choosing to stay. Sometimes the very systems that are supposed to protect us force us back into danger. The truth is, protective orders are even often violated. Survivors who report still face retaliation, stalking, harassment, violence that escalates because the abuser knows you just tried to stand up. And here's the brutal reality. When survivors do everything right, when we call the police, when we press charges, when we tell the truth, we are often left just as vulnerable as before, sometimes even more. Because now the abuser is angry, and we're even more alone. That night, the message was loud and fucking clear for me. He had more power than I did, even with a face that was bloody, even with my words on paper, even with him in handcuffs for a moment. He still walked free before I did. And I was sent back to the same place he would be waiting. So when people ask, why didn't you just leave? I think of that night every time. Because I did leave. I walked barefoot for miles, broken and begging for help. And they drove me right back into fucking hell. Everybody thinks that the danger is in staying. They don't realize that the real danger begins when you start planning to leave. People imagine leaving as this clean break. You grab your things and you walk out the door and you never look back. But when you're the one that's living it, you know better. You know that leaving isn't freedom. It's a fucking trigger. It's the exact moment your abuser realizes he's losing control. And that's when he becomes most dangerous. I remember lying in bed at night and staring at the ceiling, my body stiff beside his, and my heart was pounding so fucking loud that I honestly thought he could hear it. And my brain just kept whispering, don't move, don't breathe, don't let him know that you're thinking of leaving. Because if he suspected, even for a second, I knew what would happen to me. And here's the part that a lot of people just don't get. Abusers, they almost smell fear. They can sense distance and they could feel when that mask slips, even for a fucking second. And when they feel you slipping away, they don't beg you to stay. They make sure you understand what leaving will cost. And that's not being paranoid. That's survival instinct. And here are some numbers to prove it. Women are far more likely to be murdered in the weeks after leaving than at any other point in their relationship. More than 75% of intimate partners homicides happen after the victim has left or attempted to leave. Stalking, threats, harassment, they almost always escalate once you try to break free. So again, when people ask, why didn't you just leave? What they're really saying is, why didn't you risk your life sooner? The fear isn't just of him, it's layered. It's fear of violence, yes, but it's also fear of retaliation. It's fear of losing your kids or fear of being homeless, fear of being judged and abandoned by the very people who should love you. And then there's the fear that lives in your fucking body because abuse rewires you. Your nervous system learns compliance. Your body goes into freeze mode. And that automatic shutdown when fight or flight it's not an option. You laugh when he makes a joke, even though you're dying inside. You go still when he touches you, even when every cell in your body wants to run. People see weakness. What they aren't seeing is survival in action. That's the double hell of it. You're terrified of staying, but you're even more terrified of leaving. And so you say, you stay because it's not because you're stupid, not because you like chaos, but because leaving feels like lighting a fucking match that could burn your entire life to the fucking ground. And that's what survivors are weighing when they don't run at the first punch, the first threat, the first trip to the hospital. They're not just asking, can I leave? They're asking, will I even survive if I try to leave? So when the world asks us, why didn't you just leave? My answer is this: because leaving isn't the end of the danger. It's typically the beginning. And people think that leaving is a single moment, one decision, one door slammed shut. They don't see that for survivors, leaving is an entire season of survival all in its own. For myself, when I finally decided I had to get out, it wasn't a burst of courage at all. It was with calculation. Fear was still in my throat. It was in my bones and in every breath I took. I knew that if I tipped my hand too soon or gave it away, he would sense that I was planning anything at all. And it would be the end of me. So I did what many survivors do. I performed. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I laughed at his jokes when my stomach was in knots. I laid next to him at night, steadying my breath while my brain spun like a machine, rehearsing lies I'd need to tell him if he caught me. The exit plan wasn't one night of running. It was months of pretending to be okay while I was secretly building a life raft. It looked like hiding my cash in places that he would never check and memorizing phone numbers because I couldn't risk writing them down, studying the way his mood shifted so I know the safest moments to make a move, practicing calm tones in the mirror so I wouldn't give myself away if he questioned me. This wasn't strength in the way people imagine it. It was like survival theater, and it was fucking exhausting. Every day was a balancing act, playing the part well enough to keep him calm, but not so well that I would lose sight of why I was doing it. Because sometimes when you pretend long enough, you start to forget the truth. And that's the part of what people don't understand. It's not just the abuse that keeps us stuck. It's the psychological conditioning. It's the trauma bonding. It's the cycle of abuse that mixes fear with apologies, pain with promises, chaos with rare moments of tenderness. He could literally destroy me one night and then the next morning bring me a coffee like nothing happened. That whiplash isn't just confusing, it's chemical. It's addictive. It's how survivors get pulled back again and again, even when we know better. And still, I planned. Because here's another truth people don't know. It often takes multiple attempts to leave for good. Not because we're weak, not because we like the chaos, but because leaving an abuser isn't walking away from a bad boyfriend. It's dismantling an entire cage that was built around you, one fucking bar at a time. While I was planning, I felt like I was living two lives. In one, I was his partner, I was cooking, laughing, existing, and in the other, I felt like a fugitive. I was plotting an escape, mapping safety, and building secrets inside my own home. And the judgment of people only made it harder. The whispers. If it were me, I would have left, or she's still with him. It must not be that bad. They didn't see the months of work it took just to get to the point of being able to walk out that door. They didn't know how careful I had to be, how dangerous it was to even dream about leaving. They didn't see the bruises that were always under my makeup or the way my body flinched at sudden sounds. The exit plan, it wasn't bravery the way people want it to look. It was survival dressed up as compliance. So when people ask me, why didn't you leave? My answer is simple. Because it took strategy, lies, and risking everything just to get one chance at freedom. And even then, leaving wasn't the end. It was just the start of almost a new kind of fear. Because when I finally got out, I thought freedom would feel like air, like I could finally breathe, like the nightmare was over. But it wasn't. It wasn't the relief that washed over me. It was sheer terror. Because abusers don't just let you go, they punish you for leaving. And weeks after I had escaped, after I'd done the paperwork, after I stood in front of a judge and secured a restraining order, I woke up one morning thinking, maybe life is finally shifting. I got dressed for work and I opened the door and stepped outside and my stomach dropped. I stopped breathing and all 4 of my tires were slashed. And that kind of violence, that it's not just about money or an inconvenience. It's a psychological warfare. It's a message written in rubber and steel. You'll never really be free of me. And that's the reality nobody wants to talk about. People believe that once you leave, once you filed the papers, and once you stood up in court, you're safe. They think the story ends with a restraining order. But here's the truth. Protective orders are frequently violated. More than 60% of women who report stalking by a former partner are physically assaulted by that same person later. And in the US, 1 out of 3 women who are murdered by an intimate partner had already left the relationship. Leaving doesn't end abuse. It changes form. Retaliation looks like slashed tires. It looks like harassing phone calls at 2 a.m. It looks like showing up at your job or your parents' house or where you're living, your kids' school. It looks like threats to take the children, ruin your reputation, or burn your entire life down, piece by piece. And it's not just the abuser's actions that cut. It's the system's response. Because when I called the police about my tires, do you think I was met with urgency or with safety planning or real protection? No. I was met with sighs, notes scribbled half-heartedly into a report, and a tone that said, "What did you expect?" That's the slap in the face survivors live with. We risk everything to leave. And when retaliation comes, we're met with paperwork instead of protection. And the world still asks us, why didn't you just leave? As if leaving was the end. As if leaving didn't come with new dangers, new battles, new scars. When people minimize retaliation, they don't realize how much it keeps survivors trapped. We weigh the risk of leaving against the risk of staying. And when we know leaving means waking up to slashed tires, stalking, harassment, and a system that shrugs, sometimes staying feels safer. But here's the part I need survivors to hear. Retaliation is real. It's terrifying. And it's not your fault. If your abuser retaliates, that doesn't mean you made the wrong choice with leaving. It means they're showing the fucking world who they are. And every act of retaliation, no matter how painful, is proof of the truth that you've carried all along. This person is dangerous. This person was never love. Leaving didn't end the war, but it put me on the side of freedom, even when it came with slashed tires and nights of sleeping with one eye open. People love to tell survival stories like they're simple, like the abuse ends when you leave, and like once you walk out the door, you're healed and free and ready to start over. But here's the truth. Leaving doesn't erase the damage. Survivors don't walk away clean. We walk away carrying invisible wounds, and the world rarely sees them. The reality is this: abuse doesn't just bruise your body. It breaks down your identity, piece by piece. It strips away your self-trust, your connections, your resources, until the only version of you left is the one built for survival. We don't leave because we're scared of what happens next. Because abusers don't let you just walk away. They stalk, they harass, they retaliate. We don't leave because we don't have anywhere to go. Because they usually cut off our friendships, ruin our family ties, and convince us we're all alone. Isolation isn't an accident. It's a fucking weapon. We don't leave because we can afford to. Because they control the money, they drain the accounts, they ruined our credit. Financial abuse happens in nearly every abusive relationship. And it's one of the strongest reasons that survivors get trapped. We don't leave because we're trauma bonded, because the same person who beats us also cries, apologizes, and promises. And for a moment, we believe it. Trauma bonding isn't a weakness. It's what happens when your brain mixes fear with fleeting moments of relief and mistakes it for love. We don't leave because our bodies are stuck in survival mode, because the nervous system doesn't reset just because you know better. Your body learns compliance. Your body freezes. Your body says, play it safe. Don't rock the boat. Survive today so maybe you'll get to tomorrow. And even when we do leave, these realities, they don't disappear. We carry them with us. That's what people don't get. They look at survivors and see the bruises fade and the smiles return and Instagram posts go back up, and they think, we're better. But what they don't see are the panic attacks in the middle of the night, the hypervigilance in every new relationship, the way our stomach drops when someone raises their voice. They don't see us triple checking locks and replaying old arguments in our head, or flinching when somebody touches us unexpectedly. They don't see us counting every dollar, terrified of being financially trapped again. They don't see us second guessing every decision because years of being gaslighted and it rewired our sense of reality. And then to top all of that comes the judgment, the whispers. She stayed for too long. The accusations. He wasn't that bad. Or the dismissals. It's over now. Why hasn't she moved on? That's the part that cuts the deepest. Survivors aren't just fighting what happened inside the relationship. We're fighting the judgment outside of it. We're not only surviving abuse, we're surviving a world that refuses to fucking understand it. When people ask, why didn't you just leave? They erase all of this. They erase the complexity, the danger, the fear, the conditioning. They erase our reality. But here's the truth I need every survivor to know. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you were surviving. You left when you could, and that is enough. When people ask, why didn't you leave? What they're really saying is, I need to believe I would have done better. Because that's the comfort people cling to. That's the illusion that abuse could have never happened to them, that they would have spotted the signs sooner, that they would be stronger, braver, smarter. They don't want to face the truth that anyone can be broken down. anyone can be manipulated and anyone can be trapped. So instead of holding the abuser accountable, they put the weight back onto the survivor. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you see it sooner? Why didn't you fight harder? It's victim blaming dressed up as curiosity, and it's fucking poison. The real question should be, why did he choose to abuse? Why did he choose violence? Why did he decide my body and my safety and my life were his to control? That's where the responsibility belongs, always. But people don't want to ask those questions because the answers are uncomfortable. They reveal how widespread and normalized abuse really is. And society would rather believe survivors are weak than face the truth about how common abusers are. Here are some numbers that rarely get talked about. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men will experience severe intimate partner violence in their lifetime. 1 in 7 women have been injured by an intimate partner badly enough to require medical care. And every year in the United States, there are more than 10 million people who are physically abused by an intimate partner. Let me repeat that one. Every year in the United States, more than 10 fucking million people are physically abused by an intimate partner. Abuse isn't rare. It's not happening somewhere else or to other people. It's happening in neighborhoods and schools and families, workplaces. It's happening behind closed doors that you've walked past. But instead of seeing that, people cling to the stereotypes. They picture abuse as black eyes and broken bones, not realizing that most of it's quieter. It's manipulation and gaslighting and financial control and isolation, strangulation with no marks visible. They believe the charming version the abuser presents to the world and doubt the survivor who's too exhausted to keep explaining. That disbelief is its own kind of violence. It isolates and it silences and it re-traumatizes. I remember the look in people's eyes when I would try to talk about what I'd been through. Some would look away uncomfortable, or some asked questions that felt like it was cross-examinations. Some flat out didn't believe me because he seemed so nice. And that silence, that dismissal, it cuts deeper than the bruises ever could. And that's what people don't see. Survivors don't just endure abuse. We endure the invalidation that follows. We learn not just how to survive the abuser, but how to survive a world that doesn't want to hear the truth. So when somebody asks me, why didn't you just leave? I want to turn it back. Why don't you believe me? Why don't you hold him accountable? Why don't you see how common this is? Because the truth is, survivors don't need judgment. We need to be seen. We need to be believed. We need people willing to carry the discomfort of our stories instead of pushing it back onto us. That's what people don't see. And that's what survivors live with every fucking day. So let me say this clearly as I can. If you've ever stayed, if you've ever gone back, if you ever frozen in place and thought, maybe it's my fault, hear me. You are not weak. You are not stupid. You are not fucking broken. You were surviving. The world wants survival to look like strength. Bold, loud, obvious, but survival doesn't look like that. Survival looks like compliance. It looks like silence. It looks like laughing at his jokes so he doesn't get angry. It looks like staying in bed when every nerve in your body is screaming to run. Survival looks like whatever it had to look like to keep you fucking alive. And if you stayed, that wasn't weakness. That was your nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. Keep you breathing. Get you through today. Buy you another tomorrow. And if you left and you went back, that wasn't failure. That was either fear or trauma bonding or both. That was hope twisted into a weapon. That was the cycle of abuse pulling you in with promises that maybe this time would be different. That's not stupidity. That's conditioning. That's chemicals in your fucking brain. That's what happens when fear and love get tangled up so tight, you can't tell them apart. And if you finally got out, that wasn't luck. That was courage. Even if you were terrified, even if you stumbled the whole way, even if it took you 7 tries, you fucking did it. The shame is not yours. The shame belongs to the one who abused you. You don't have to carry their choices like their sin, like it's your sin. You don't have to wear their violence like it's your scarlet letter. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone who wasn't there, who didn't see the way you were broken down piece by piece until you almost forgot your own name. Your story does not need to be neat or believable to anyone else. It doesn't have to follow the timeline they expected. It doesn't have to be delivered with a calm voice and dry eyes to be valid. Your truth is your truth. Messy, fragmented, bloody, holy, it's fucking yours. And if you're still in it right now, if you're lying awake at night, planning, waiting, praying for a window to leave, I need you to know something. You're not crazy for staying. You're not fucking failing. You're surviving the only way you know how. And one day, when you are ready, when you have your own mental support, when you have the chance, you will leave. And when you do, none of this will have been your fault. You are not too far gone. You are not behind. And you are not broken beyond repair. You are a fucking survivor. And that means there's still life in you. There's still fight in you. And there's still hope for a future that you probably can't even picture yet. So don't you dare believe the lie that your worth is measured by how quickly you left, how clean your story sounds, or how neatly you've healed. You are here, and that is enough. So why didn't you just leave? That's the question survivors are haunted with. The question whispered in courtrooms and hospitals and therapy offices, at family dinners. The question that blames us instead of the one who broke us. But here's the truth. You don't owe the answer to anyone. You don't have to justify why you stayed. You don't have to explain why you went back, or you don't have to defend the choices you made when you were in survival mode. Because the truth isn't, why didn't you leave sooner? The truth is, you lived through fucking hell and you are still here. When people ask me, why didn't you just leave? I want to flip this back to them. Why did he choose to abuse? Why did he choose violence? Why is the burden on survivors to explain survival instead on the abusers to explain why cruelty? That's the shift the world needs to make. Because the question isn't, why didn't she leave? It's, why did he hurt her? It's, why does society excuse him? Why do systems fail again and again? Survivors don't need more questions. We need accountability. We need safety. We need compassion. So if you're listening to this right now, here's what I want you to know. You don't have to carry their questions anymore. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit their narrative. You don't have to prove your fucking pain to the people who were never in the room with you. Your survival is proof enough. Your healing is proof enough. And you are proof enough. Let them keep their questions. You've already lived the answers. And the next time someone dares to ask, why didn't you just leave? You can stand in your truth and say, because I was surviving, because leaving wasn't safe, because the shame isn't mine to carry, because the only question that matters isn't about me. It's about the one who chose to abuse. And you could let that dagger of judgment fall right back out of your body, because you don't owe the world a defense of your survival. You owe yourself the freedom to finally live without the shame. Take what you need, leave what you don't, and remember, healing grows where compassion lives, not where judgment lingers.